Hey guys, welcome back. Imprakashi here. Now, I did actually do another take of this earlier, but I've been playing with some things with my audio because if you guys know on my channel, my audio has always been a little quieter on my videos. I want to see if I can fix that. The first time though, it was too much, and it actually ended up hitting the higher point on the mic where it just like doesn't sound right. So this time I tried still making it higher, but not as high, so it's not peaking. So hopefully that works, and we'll get to it here. So, some things about this game first before we jump into it. John, our protagonist from the previous game, is no longer the protagonist. Well, he's the male lead, but the female lead, Lizzie, is actually now the main character who we're playing it through. She's now the protagonist. So we're going to see some interesting game mechanics, which I'll show you as we play through. And also some interesting features, which I'll also show you as we go through. Again, I have played this before, but it's been a long time, so some of the features I do remember, or will come back to me as we play. Others, but a lot of the story points will be new to me. Now, unfortunately, again, for these first 15 minutes of it, I did already do this, just actually a few moments ago, so those will not be new to me at all. But I mean, hey. You gotta do what you gotta do for quality, am I right? So, let's go ahead and jump into it. Alright, so that's just the one letting you know that's a sequel. We did play it. We even went back there to make sure we got the true ending. So we're good to go. Now guys, for the narration, again, since this is Lizzie's perspective, I'm gonna be using kind of a more of a tone that's really just kind of softer maybe a little bit, but also a little more cynical and a little more, how do I put it? Anyhow, you'll see what I'm talking about. Deliberate, that's the word. The melancholy melody echoed within her, and Lizzie clung to it. There was a time when the melody hadn't been within her, though she preferred not to think about that time, and that was before she met him. The melody was sad, but it was his, and so she loved it. And it was certainly better than emptiness. Lizzie had expected that meeting her special person would change everything, and it had, but to her surprise, it hadn't happened all at once. Instead, they both grew and changed, their life together becoming even more wonderful, and her mind growing to encompass it. Yet she had a difficult time pinpointing exactly when she had first heard the melody. It would have been romantic if it had appeared at some momentous occasion, such as when she first met him, or when they first made love, or some future day when they were finally married. But instead, it slowly emerged, whispering at the edges of her mind. Smiling to herself, Lizzie began to contemplate the beginnings of the melody more thoroughly, but at that moment, her world was disrupted by two people approaching her. Her eyes flickered over their substanceless bodies, analyzing everything about them. She distantly knew the girl's name, had only seen the boy on several occasions, both sophomores like John and her. No physical threat. Lizzie had seen the two of them holding hands on the campus green, and from pupil dilation judged them to be a couple, so unlikely to be a threat to her relationship. But now they were approaching her. She put on her usual smile and considered them more carefully. So, this is something I like to point out in this one, so we can see exactly how Lizzie's mindset works here. So she pretty much does a deep dive analysis of every person she meets. Now, this could be also what's known as paranoia, which is, the thought that everyone's out to get you. But in this case, it ties directly into her being Yandere, and she's literally judging all this to see, will this person go after John? That's pretty much the entirety of what it focuses on. Now, does she have other issues? Yes, but the way it pretty much all focuses down to after she met John is that all of her mental issues are now focused around John. And John's kind of the key that holds it together for her, around with her own will. Now, her own will sometimes wants her to do it, But as you can see, her mind is always dragging her back to the other point, and it's the thoughts of John that kind of keep her from doing those things. Like, would John want me to do that? You know, kind of like what would Jesus do kind of thing, but with John. So that's kind of like where she is in her mindset. The boy was normal enough, but the girl, she was rather pretty, and she dressed fairly well. It would take so little for her to try to show off what she had. By the way, in the next scene, we're about to see something that a feature of the game. Now, see, this isn't what she's actually doing. It's not what she's actually doing here. This is Lizzie's perspective of how she sees her. So in other words, she's kind of seeing her as a slut right now. Was that a teasing glint in her eye? Lizzie's smile widened just a bit, and she reclassified the girl as a minor threat. So, for these characters, we're going to notice that she pretty much sees them as mobs. So, I've thought of giving them very typical, or, like for the girls, like giving them Valley Girl type voices, because that's kind of how Lizzie sees them, and we're going to do it from her perspective. So that's kind of my idea, and also it makes it really easy on me if I just have to do the same voice. So, here goes nothing. Hey, sorry to interrupt, Lizzie, right? That's right, nice to meet you. She responded politely as they introduced themselves, only tracking the information for future reference. Once, putting on a friendly mask had been difficult for her, an imitation of something she'd only observed. Now, she could fake it more easily, mirroring real emotions she had when she was with him. So in other words, before, she had never even experienced happiness. But then with John, she had that, so she's kind of like taking that, she's copying and pasting her emotions with John to when she's with other people to kind of look normal. But we'll see that she doesn't really like doing that, but she does it, again, just to kind of fit in. It irritated her to waste her smiles on random people who didn't matter, though as soon as possible, Lizzie encouraged them to get to the point. We're trying to start a social thing for other couples on campus. They may be around the same age, but hanging out with single college kids just isn't the same, you know? We don't, have many people yet, so if you have any ideas, we're open to them. Either of you. Your husband's name is John, right? Why did she know his name? Lizzie's smile became brittle as she stared over the girl again, searching for the slightest tick that might give her away. She had played it off like she wasn't sure about his name, but she knew. Lizzie was sure of it. Perhaps her analysis of their threat was wrong. She had dismissed them as a couple, but neglected to consider how impure most love was. This girl might ignore her partner and talk to John. Or they could be one of those sexually adventurous couples she'd read about, prowling for other couples. Lizzie had not given a single real thought to the subject until that moment when bloody hatred crawled itself out of her soul. Just as she was about to let these emotions leak out onto her face, Lizzie heard the melody again over the beating of her heart. Sad, but calm. She wasn't sure what John would say to her, but the thought of him soothed her growing rage. It was also possible that the girl hadn't wanted to seem too forward, like they had been tracking them. Checking their faces more carefully, Lizzie saw hints of nervousness and forced casualness. She set aside her main concern, flagging it as a potential problem for future consideration. Only a tiny fraction of a second had passed. Lizzie gave them both an apologetic smile. This is the thing about Lizzie. She might be crazy, but she's also crazy smart, because you think about how much information is she processing in a fraction of a second. That's kind of insane. Sorry. That's very kind of you, but it's hard for us to have much of a social life. We're trying to get our degrees quickly. Oh, that's a shame. Offer's still open, though. Get your husband to know, okay? Let your husband know, okay? Okay. With that, Lizzie brushed past them as quickly as she could without seeming rude. Despite the potential threat and new source of danger to consider, she also felt a little warm. People thought they were married. They were often together on campus, but Lizzie had thought she'd restrained the majority of her affection for when they were alone. The warmth drained away slowly as Lizzie went about her business. Though they still were married, John was willing to tie the knot, but the thought of it had made her heart leap into her chest. It had nothing to do with the idea of being with him. Lizzie berated herself for the very thought, and everything to do with how she was sure that the wedding would draw bad luck to them somehow. At first, she hadn't wanted to get married because she was afraid that the official record would draw Koitek down on them somehow. By the way, if you don't know who Koitek is, that means you probably didn't watch the first gameplay. So if you haven't, go back and watch. It's in a playlist on the channel. And if you're from the Yandere playlist, well, you can see them all there. All the Yandere games we do. Because, I've done quite a few, alright? Look, quite a few. And if you have more recommendations, by the way, you can always let me know in the comment section below. Alright, sorry about that. Let's get back to it. So yeah, they're worried about Koitek finding them. But have they yet? I don't think so. But over 2 years had passed since the violent incident, and it was clear that they had escaped, and enrolling in college hadn't drawn any negative attention either, so it was safe for them to get married. And yet, something would go wrong, even if they didn't invite anyone. She was sure that someone would ruin their day, and while no one could possibly ruin their relationship, she would only have one wedding day, and she wanted it to be perfect. Suddenly, the people around her were too many, faceless, soulless creatures. Moving past her indifferently, the drone of their voices drowned out the melody. Stopping in place, Lizzie frowned, struggling to regain it, but his melody had drifted out of her mind, and no amount of thinking about the joy she felt with him would bring it back. Checking the time, Lizzie decided that she had enough before she needed to get to class. Normally she preferred to arrive early, but that was no longer her priority. The gentle buzz of class, which she usually found passable, a pale second to being with him would now only disrupt her. It was difficult to hold herself back. Lizzie managed to sprint across campus no faster than an ordinary runner. This wasn't the first time, and someone from the track team had actually tried to recruit her. That was unacceptable. The track uniforms were flattering, but everyone would be wearing them. Of course, he would come out to the events to be supportive, but that meant his eyes would be assaulted by the entire female track team. That could not be allowed. Do you see this, guys? I'm not moving the mouse. I'm not moving the mouse. See what it does? So look, I can put it anywhere on the screen. Anywhere I put it on the screen. And look where it goes to. Nope, does it go to John Wood? Nope. All the way to kill them. So that's what Lizzie's all about. So we want her to go with the one that actually helps her, which is John. I think if we do the other ones, it may not be strong enough reason for it, because her being like, oh no, don't do it. No, John wouldn't want you to do it. That's where we're going. All right, that's probably gonna be the safest option here. Lizzie gripped her forehead with both hands, forcing the thought away. She didn't need to do that anymore. The hollowness within her grew and grew as she left campus. Fortunately, their little apartment was nearby, a split home provided as housing for couples. It had taken serious work to obtain one despite not being married, as the fools in administration thought there was a chance she and John might break up. Since it was 2:52, John was likely to be reading for a class. He had referenced a paper being due soon, but he never went down to the computer lab until she was in class. After all, he knew that she might need him. This consideration and a warm glow spread through Lizzie. That wasn't enough. She needed to see him. She had her key in hand as she approached the door, but it was already unlocked, almost as if he had known. Lizzie threw it open and rushed inside. And there he is. There's John. It's funny, it actually took me 15 minutes to get here last time, too, on the first recording. That's so funny that actually took the same amount of time. John sat on the couch, reading a textbook. He looked perfect. And when he glanced up at the noise and saw her there, gasping for breath, with eyes wild, he just gave a comforting smile. Hey, everything alright, Lizzie? Of course it is. I just forgot a book I needed for class. She swept up to him and wrapped her arms around his shoulders to give him a slow kiss. The sight of him had calmed her considerably, and Lizzie tried to keep the desperation out of the kiss. Yes, this warm intimacy with him was what she needed. There was no sense in giving him anything to worry about. She had found him, her perfect person. Lizzie drew back slightly and rested her forehead against his, her heart filled with warmth and his melody strong in her mind once again. I love you, Lizzie. It made her heart flutter just as much as the first time he'd said it. I love you too, John, more than anything. But as happy as she was to reply, she sensed that something wasn't quite right. There was a bit of tension in his eyes. Was he carrying some weight? Depression? Had someone done something to him? No, Lizzie. Realized that wasn't it. He was looking at her with concern, having sensed some part of her neediness. It was wonderful that he was so attentive, but the idea that she could have caused him any pain broke her heart. This, guys, okay, sorry for being loud there, but this is what I'm talking about, guys. This is when Lizzie is contained, she's what I call a healthy yandere. When she's contained, normally she's not. If you're not very careful with her, she could very easily turn into a not healthy yandere, where she just goes on a murder spree. But when she's, good and under her control, like she's not going on a rampage, where she's able to control her emotions and not, give in. She really cares about her partner, because some yanderes we see are just obsessed. They're just obsessed. They just care about having the person. They don't care about themselves or their emotions or anything like that. But here we see that she does care about John, and that to her, hurting John is just like hurting yourself. And that's like something you'd see in a normal, healthy relationship between two people who are actually, in a healthy, good, equal relationship. That's how it should be. So it's really good to see that here. Again, it's kind of just like off the track there, but when these yandere games, I kind of like to look at these kind of things and look at it and see, okay, could this person function in the real world? Could this person even exist in the real world? Possibly not, because this is kind of like, going off of drugs and things like that. Now, other people with depression, obsession, things like that, of course. But the way hers is, I don't know if it's exactly could be realistic, but hey, it's a game. It's all good. And like I said, I like these elements that it does. It's great for storytelling. Whether it's actually good for realism, that doesn't matter. It's good for storytelling. All right, back to the game. Sorry. Is there anything you want to talk about? Okay, so let's see. Is there anything that brings us to now? So let's see. So we could encourage him, which I guess is trying to cheer him up for her like that. Maybe encourage him on his paper. Bring up something else. Ask indirectly. Explain fully. Let's explain fully. We're going to build a trusting relationship between the two. Well, there was this couple. She explained the encounter, hesitating a moment to give him her full thoughts. But eventually, sharing as expected, he wasn't disturbed by her fears and didn't tell her that she was wrong. John had been through too much with her, after all. You think it was nothing unusual? Judging from what you said, they just sound lonely to me. They probably just want to find people they have something in common with. Maybe. But even if that's true, I still don't want them anywhere near us. They're probably stupid, evil people, John. All we need is the two of us. And see, that's where it gets to the unhealthy part here. But for yanderes, this is again, this is unless they're like on the very high end of it, like which only go after people who like cheat, like they literally go crazy when they cheat. Those are very rare. We don't really see them in too many stories. In fact, I'm trying to think of any of them that are actually 100% like that. I'm not sure. But Lizzie is one of those who doesn't even want to chance anything. She just wants her and John to be together. Now, as you can tell from before, she doesn't necessarily see guys as a threat as much. At least not yet. We'll see if that happens in the future. But for now, she doesn't see guys as a threat. Her smile, he smiled. He smiled ruefully, but there was real affection in his expression too. John pulled her into a quick embrace and squeezed her tight. If that's how you feel, we don't need to interact with other people. I kind of want to just keep my head down and graduate anyway. I agree. She cuddled with him for a moment longer, nestling her head against his chest, then reluctantly pulled back, watching her hair as it clung to him. Though she longed to stay, she knew that it was better to go to class. Maximizing time in the short term would only hinder their long-term objectives, and she wanted as much of him as she could possibly get. Lizzie headed to their bedroom and traded one spiral notebook for another, feeling a moment of guilt at the deception. But no, it was better this way. She could take the burden onto herself and leave his life lighter. Alright, so since that's where she's leaving John, that's also where we're gonna leave this episode. And of course, Lizzie, when I say leave John, I don't mean you're leaving him for good. I just mean leaving him for this time period. Alright, look, don't come after me, Lizzie, alright? Alright. Anyhow, guys, I hope you enjoyed the first episode of Crimson Gray 1.5, which it's 1.5, by the way. It's not 2. It's 1.5. But yeah, so this is gonna be a really fun game, guys. I know we're all gonna enjoy it. We're all gonna like it. We've already seen a lot of elements here that we could even talk about and discuss, which is really interesting. I love seeing that, and I'm looking forward to seeing more in the coming episodes. Anyhow, guys, thank you so much for coming back and enjoying it with me, and I'll see you all in the next one. Later.